teenage boy. No military training, no government backing, no weapons, no plan beyond the kind of wild idea that only a 19-year-old would take seriously enough to actually attempt. Just a small single-engine plane that cost him less than a used car. The airspace he flew through was protected by the most paranoid military defense system ever built. The Soviet Union had spent hundreds of billions of dollars constructing a nuclear air defense grid specifically designed to detect and destroy anything that entered its airspace without permission. Radar stations, surface-to-air missile batteries, interceptor jets on permanent standby. A system so sensitive, it had previously shot down a commercial passenger jet carrying 269 innocent people, simply for being in the wrong place. And a teenager from West Germany flew straight through the middle of it, in a plane that cruised at the speed of a fast car and landed in Red Square, right next to the Kremlin. This is the story of how a boy with a hobby and a borrowed plane exposed the most dangerous lie the Soviet military had ever told, and accidentally ended careers, changed governments, and accelerated the end of the Cold War.
Level 1. The shield that protected everything. To understand what Mathias Rust did, you need to understand what he flew through. The Soviet air defense network was not just impressive, it was the entire foundation of Soviet military credibility. The Cold War ran on one basic principle: mutually assured destruction. If America launched nuclear missiles at the Soviet Union, the Soviets could launch back. Both sides would be destroyed. So neither side launched. But that logic only worked if both sides genuinely believed the other could defend itself and retaliate. The Soviet air defense grid was the physical proof of that belief. Thousands of radar installations stretching across the entire western border. Surface-to-air missile batteries positioned to cover every possible approach corridor. MiG interceptor jets, some of the fastest aircraft ever built, sitting in hangars across the country. Pilots ready to scramble in minutes. The system had proven itself willing to act without hesitation. In 1983, a Korean Airlines passenger jet accidentally strayed into Soviet airspace. The military tracked it, identified it as a potential threat, and shot it down over the ocean, killing all 269 people on board. No warnings, no mercy, no mistakes. The message to the world was clear. Nothing enters Soviet airspace uninvited and survives. That was the official position. That was the foundation of Soviet military power. And on May 28, 1987, a 19-year-old named Mathias Rust took off from Helsinki in a small Cessna 172 and made every single word of that position a lie.
Level 2. The boy with the plan. Mathias Rust was not a spy. He was not working for any government. No intelligence agency recruited him. No secret organization funded him. No handler gave him a mission. He was a teenager from Hamburg who had been flying small planes since he was 17. He had maybe 50 hours of flight experience. He flew for fun, for the feeling of it. But he had an idea that he couldn't let go of. He wanted to do something for world peace. Genuinely, he was a teenager in the middle of the Cold War, watching Reagan and Gorbachev fail to agree on arms reduction talks in Reykjavik just months earlier, and he decided that what the world needed was a symbolic gesture, something that proved the two superpowers could talk, could reach each other, could be less afraid. His plan was to fly to Moscow, land near the Kremlin, and somehow, through the sheer insanity of arriving uninvited in a toy plane, start a conversation. It sounds like the kind of idea you have at 19 and then don't actually do. Mathias Rust did it. He rented a Cessna 172, a small single-engine aircraft, the kind of plane used for beginner flying lessons. Top speed of around 230 kilometers per hour, roughly the speed of a fast car on a highway. He filed a fake flight plan to Stockholm, flew to Helsinki instead, topped up his fuel, and then turned east, towards Soviet airspace. But here is the question nobody has ever fully answered. How did he get through?
Level 3. The system that saw everything and did nothing. The Soviet radar system detected Mathias Rust almost immediately. He was tracked as soon as he crossed the border. The radar operators saw him. They logged him. They reported him up the chain. And then, almost unbelievably, the system lost him. Not because he was invisible, not because he flew below radar. He was flying in clear conditions at low altitude in a bright white and red plane. He was lost because of something far more embarrassing. A Soviet training exercise was happening at the same time in a nearby area. Multiple aircraft on radar screens, operators juggling multiple contacts. And somewhere in the confusion of the exercise, Rust's signal was reclassified. Some accounts suggest an operator marked him as a friendly aircraft. Others suggest the signal was merged with a returning Soviet plane and then simply dropped when that plane landed. Either way, the most paranoid air defense system in human history looked directly at a teenager in a Cessna and decided he wasn't worth worrying about. Honestly, think about this from the perspective of the Soviet radar operator. You are sitting at your station. You have been trained for years. You see a small, slow-moving contact appear on your screen near the border. You report it. Your superior tells you it has been handled. The signal disappears. Do you push back? Do you escalate further up the chain? Or do you trust the system you have been trained to trust and go back to watching your screen? Because the answer to that question, multiplied across dozens of operators and commanders that day, is exactly why Rust made it all the way to Moscow.
Level 4. Red Square. Mathias Rust flew for over 5 hours through Soviet airspace. 5 hours! At the speed of a fast car. In a plane that any Soviet MiG could have intercepted in under 3 minutes. He flew over Novgorod, over the Soviet countryside, over cities and military installations and radar stations that were all, supposedly, watching the sky. Nobody stopped him. As he approached Moscow, he began looking for somewhere to land. He had originally planned to land near the Kremlin, but the area was too crowded, too many people, too many obstacles. So he circled twice. Over central Moscow, over one of the most militarily sensitive locations on the entire planet. And then he found his spot, Bolshoi-Moskvoretsky Bridge. A large bridge right next to Red Square, right next to St. Basil's Cathedral, right next to the Kremlin wall itself. Climbed out and stood in the middle of Red Square in his flight suit, while confused Soviet citizens gathered around him taking photographs. The most protected airspace in the world. A 50-hour pilot in a rented Cessna. 5 hours of undetected landing 100 meters from the Kremlin. The killer ending? The Soviet response was immediate and devastating. Not to Rust, though he was arrested within minutes and sentenced to 4 years in a Soviet prison before being released early. The response that mattered happened inside the Soviet military. Mikhail Gorbachev was in Beijing when it happened. When he landed back in Moscow and was told what had occurred, he was furious. Not just embarrassed. Furious in the way that only a leader can be when his entire military establishment has just been exposed as fundamentally, catastrophically broken in front of the entire world. Within days, Gorbachev fired the Soviet Minister of Defense. He dismissed the commander of Soviet air defense. He removed or reassigned over 300 senior military officers. The largest single purge of Soviet military leadership since World War II. The men who had spent careers building and maintaining the myth of Soviet air defense invincibility, gone. In a week, because of a teenage boy in a Cessna. And here is the question for the comments. Was Mathias Rust a hero? A naive teenager who accidentally accomplished something no spy agency or military power had managed? And whose flight genuinely helped Gorbachev weaken the military hardliners blocking arms reduction talks? Or was he a reckless fool who got extraordinarily lucky and could just as easily have started a war? Because historians are still divided, and I want to know which side you are. The Soviet air defense network had cost hundreds of billions of dollars. It had killed 269 innocent passengers on a commercial flight for crossing into its airspace. It was the physical foundation of Soviet military credibility in the Cold War. And a 19-year-old flew in a plane that cost less than a used car, landed next to the Kremlin,
and got out to sign an article. The most feared air defense system in human history defeated by a teenager who just wanted to do something nice for world peace.